Hey guys, welcome back to the homestead. My name is Mike. I got a good video for you guys. So in this video today, we're going to be going over a couple different things. We're going to be going over one, determining if the fig tree is dormant or not. I'll give you guys some tips on how I do that. Two, we're going to go over pruning the fig tree. We're going to cut the fig tree. I'll show you guys the differences of types of cuts and how to shorten or get your fig tree ready to be winterized. Three, we're going to be going over the actual winterization itself, wrapping the fig tree up using a couple different layers and methods there. And then four, I'm going to show you guys how I like to leave the fig tree for the winter. Once it's wrapped, you're pretty much good to go. You're done, and you can move forward from there. So yeah, let's jump right into this thing. So first things first, how do you know if your fig tree is dormant or not? So number one, the telltale sign is there is no more leaves on this tree. There's not a single leaf on the tree. You can see going from the top all the way to the bottom, not a single leaf. That's the first way to tell. Number two is look at the terminal buds, right? The very tip of any of these branches here. You'll see that there's no more green wood. So what happens is the wood that comes out in the most previous growing season is generally green wood. Now when the cold temperatures hit this wood, and when things slow down and the sap stops flowing through these branches, you'll see that the wood turns from green to brown. So here's an example of one that still has a little bit green left in it. You could see just the color of it, green. Coming over to this one is pretty much brown, right? That's lignified wood. That's a good way to tell that your tree is dormant. The third way is simply score some of the bark, right? I'll use a pair of pruners, I'll cut that, and then you'll look at that cut that I just produced, and it's not really producing any sap. Maybe a little bit of sap is still flowing through this thing, but not much. Like if this was in August and the tree was really growing, this would just be dripping sap, almost like a cut on your skin and then blood. So that's just not the case here. We have a little bit of sap, but not much. So that's a good way to tell that this tree is dormant now. Again, I mean, we probably could wait another couple days, but we have really low temperatures coming. The last way is if you look at the fruit. This is obviously a fig that didn't come to maturity. They just pop right off, like they just fall off. That means the tree is done. It's not going to be ripening fruit anymore, and it's time to wrap it up. So once you determine that your tree is indeed dormant, there's next we're going to start to prune this tree. Pruning is very critical for fig trees. You have to prune them. I mean, you don't have to, but if I didn't prune this tree, it would just grow really, really tall, and it would essentially be useless because all of the figs grow on the new growth, or that first year's growth. There are certain figs or certain types of fig trees that will grow a breba crop, which is a early season fig, and that's generally, those brebas come from the previous year's wood. It's just easier to deal with when you prune it down. So I'm going to be pruning this tree pretty aggressively, not worrying about keeping a breba crop for next season. With that in mind, we're going to bring this tree down. We're going to bring this thing low. You can kind of see these are all the previous year's prune cuts where I did last year, and this tree just grew like 6 feet out of the ground or out of the previous year's cuts, which is quite a bit of growth. So going over the types of cuts, there are two types of cuts. There is a heading prune or a heading cut, and there's a thinning cut, right? Pretty easy to differentiate the two. A heading cut is when you're simply just taking the head off of a branch, right? You just take one small cut, you're leaving a lot more branch left coming from that main stem. A thinning cut is the opposite, and that's when you're coming in and actually taking an entire branch off from the base of the tree. So you're thinning it, you're taking it completely off. A heading cut, you're just taking the head off. Pretty easy to kind of differentiate the two. They're both important in their own way. With a heading cut, like the cut we just took here, there will be a bunch of new growth, very vigorous growth, to come out where that cut was taken from. So you'll get probably a couple different branches, kind of similar to here, where you could see I did a heading cut and then it blew out many branches. A thinning cut completely stops the growth of that area, and the tree will then redirect growth to a different point in the tree. Generally, I take my thinning cuts down at the bottom. I remove the branches completely because I want to keep this tree kind of in a form of a tree and less of a bush, but fig trees like to bush out. That's what they want to do, especially in the Northeast with really cold climates. They want to send a lot of new vigorous growth from the bottom, generally creating more of a bush. There's that big crazy. Nah, yeah. It's an old girl. That's a 12-year-old girl right there in great shape. Oh. Now, we're going to start pruning this tree, and like I said, good example of what a thinning cut and a heading cut is at some point I trimmed this right here. This was a heading cut, and as you can see, all that new growth came up and then branched out from where I took the cut years and years ago. This was the first year I took a cut here. It's completely healed over, and these are last year's cuts. These are all heading cuts that I took. So you won't necessarily notice any thinning cuts because a thinning cut is going to take place down here. Now let's actually do a thinning cut down here because I don't necessarily care much for this wood. So I take the cut at the lowest point, removing the entire branch, and we just thinned the middle of this tree. As you can see, in the past, I've pruned this tree so that it's kind of, there's a branch in every area. There's no two branches are overlapping or crossing over, minus this one here. This is the only branch that's kind of crossing over, and I could live with that because if we take a step back, that branch provides a great portion of fruit that's low to the ground, and I like that. I'm going to keep this particular branch, but I'm going to thin it now. So taking this entire section of wood off, we're going to look for a bud that's pointing the right direction. So if we were to take the cut right here, this would then become the new branch. This bud will grow out. So we want to watch for where our buds are, and you know, I think I like that. So this bud on the back side here, I don't know if you guys can see this bud, but that's where I want to grow. So I'm going to thin this branch and cut it all right back to that bud. Now looking back, what did we do? We removed this whole piece and we're taking that off, and we're going to save this because this is great cutting wood, right? We can make another fig tree out of this branch. So we'll just throw these aside as we're going, and I'm going to stop blabbing and I'm just going to start going. So you guys know what two types of cuts we're looking for. We're just taking this whole tree and we're bringing it down low. So as you guys saw, what I did was I really just shortened the tree up, and I did most of my heading cuts first, finding the branches that I wanted to keep with the structure that I'm looking for, which is very important. We're trying to build our tree structure when we're pruning, and that's what we're doing here. I want it to be kind of bushed out a little bit, but I don't want too many main branches coming up from the bottom. So what you saw was that I did all my heading cuts. That's all these cuts that you see here, just cutting the heads off. And then I went back and I cut all of the small branches. I did thinning cuts that were kind of coming from the bottom that are just going to create a very cluttered center and a very cluttered interior. I want this all open because the key to growing figs, guys, is sunlight exposure, or the key to ripening figs, I should say. When you're ripening figs, you're really looking for sunlight exposure, and by keeping an open center, like as you can see here, you're going to allow the sunlight to penetrate deep inside of this plant, inside of this tree, and ripen those lower figs, which are the ones that we're going to be able to reach and eat. So that's the key here. So I've shaped the tree, I did my heading cuts, I did my thinning cuts, I removed branches completely, thinned these branches that I really don't want on the tree at all. And that's going to help keep this tree open, clean, and clear. For this next step here, guys, we're going to wrap the fig tree. What you're going to need is some rope. Now, this is just some kind of rope I have on hand. You can use any kind of string rope, anything, any kind of cordage, really, that you have on hand. We're going to use a tarp. This is just a standard tarp. You get it from Home Depot. We have a little bit of burlap. Now, this isn't really necessary, but it is helpful, and I'll show you why. And then we have a bucket. Doesn't matter. This bucket is broken. It has a hole in the bottom of it, so it can't hold water. We don't need it to hold water. I'll show you what we're going to do with this bucket when we get to it. But these are the things that you're going to need to wrap the tree. Some pretty basic materials. To wrap the tree Pretty basic. We're just closing it up. If you can imagine like an umbrella, that's what we're going to be doing with this fig tree. We're just basically tightening it up so that it wraps up a little bit easier. Get the branches closer together. You won't hurt the tree by doing this. It is dormant right now, so there's no there's no sap flowing, nothing like that. So by wrapping it, it's not going to hurt the tree per se, but you do want to unwrap it before the spring really kicks off. So I'll show you guys how to do that on another video when it gets a little warmer, but today we're wrapping. So let's get this wrapped up. I'll show you pretty much how easy it is. All right, so there we have it. Pretty basic. I just kind of run around it, wrap around and around, and you just wrap it up. Now with branches like this, you could try to bend them up and get them in there like that. That's fine. That'll be okay. Things that stick out like this, there's not a problem. Don't worry about them. Bend up and get it in there what you can. If not, no big deal. They could stick out a little bit. We really just want to kind of wrap it so it's in a cylinder shape if you can. Do the best you can with this. It's not critical. It just makes it easier to tarp it. So let's move on to the next step. Next is the burlap. Now this isn't necessarily mandatory. You don't have to use this. I use it because I have it on hand and I just simply like it. I like to give my tree the best possible chance in case we have a really cold winter, but I've gone many seasons without doing this step, and my trees, they come back just fine. But again, I have it, so I'm going to do it, and you guys can do the same or not. Just do it makes you feel happy and feel good about it. So basically, real simple. Just wrap it, give it a good once over with the burlap, just like so. Careful not to completely burlap the top. You want to leave that top open. We'll get to that shortly. I'll show you why. But I just go around and simply, I'm just going to use one piece of burlap. I have another piece here. I'll save that for another tree. But that's it. We're just tucking it tight, make it nice, look like that. And when you're done, you'll have something that looks like this. Once you have that burlap layer on, then you'll put your tarp. And the tarp layer is exactly how we did the burlap layer. Very simple, just walk it around and it will it'll go right on. So let me show you how we do that. Okay, so once you get your tarp on, pretty self-explanatory, guys. You saw me do it. Just run your tarp around it a couple times, use the tarp up, flare it out a little bit on the bottom, because what we're going to do is we're going to rake some of these wood chips up to kind of insulate and hold the bottom down. Wrap it up. I just use a rope, same rope that we used before, nice and tight so it's on there good. And this is the kicker. I like to leave this top open. Now you guys can kind of understand why I have a bucket. And the reason we do this is because as the sun hits this, the snow hits this, the rain, you're going to get a lot of vapor, a lot of condensation that builds up on the inside of this. Now, to reduce the chance for mold, we want to let that vapor evaporate out the top, which is why we use the open vented method. And that's where we're going to take this bucket here. What I'm going to do with this, guys, is just kind of fit it over the top. I'll use both hands and get that thing better, but I'll tuck the tarp under this bucket and make sure that this bucket's open enough that it can allow the vapor to evaporate out of the top and escape this tree, but prevent water and snow and ice from getting down inside. And that's the point of the bucket. All right, so there you have it, guys. Your fig tree's all wrapped up for the winter. So I hope that you guys could take some tips or tricks from this video, apply it to your fig tree. It's pretty basic. As long as you're providing some kind of cover for the tree over winter, your tree will overwinter just fine. It'll come back in the spring and everything will be good to go. So I hope you guys enjoyed this content. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up. It really helps the channel. If you want to see more from me, more homesteading content, hit that subscribe button. And if I don't hear or see from you guys before the next video, have a happy holiday, a Merry Christmas, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.